Remember Donald Trump? The man who was always in the spotlight, known for his bold personality and unfiltered remarks? The hair, the tweets, the never-ending stream of controversial comments that kept everyone on edge? And of course, his relentless need to be right regardless of the consequences. Well, he's back in the headlines. This time it's not about a wall or an election, but something that could impact many directly. This time, he's decided that Canada, our friendly neighbor to the north, is actually a bunch of trade adversaries. Yes, you heard that right. His solution? Imposing a 25% tariff on all Canadian goods entering the U.S. A move that has left many puzzled. Because nothing says let's be friends like an economic stranglehold, right? It's like inviting someone to dinner and then charging them for the meal. Naturally, Canada wasn't too pleased about this. The country known for its politeness had to take a stand. Prime Minister Trudeau essentially told Trump to shove his tariffs where the moose don't roam. In diplomatic terms, of course. He pointed out the obvious. Canada and the U.S. have a pretty solid trade relationship, one that benefits both sides significantly. Disrupting that hurts everyone. From factory workers to small business owners, the ripple effects could be devastating. But Trump, being Trump, doubled down. He wasn't about to back down from a fight, especially when he started. He claimed it was all about protecting American jobs. A noble cause, but was this really the best way to go about it? Because apparently Canadians were sneaking across the border and stealing jobs from hardworking Americans, a claim that left many scratching their heads. The tension was thicker than maple syrup on a cold day. And if you've ever had Canadian maple syrup, you know that's saying something. A trade war loomed, threatening to turn two of the world's closest allies into economic enemies. The stakes were high and the world was watching. It was a classic Trump move. Create a problem, then act like you're the only one who can solve it. But this time, the solution seemed more elusive than ever. Historically, the U.S. and Canada have shared a bond that goes beyond trade. From military alliances to cultural exchanges, the two nations have been like family. Families on both sides of the border have relatives, friends, and business partners in the neighboring country. This tariff wasn't just about goods, it was about people. Small businesses in particular were bracing for impact. Many relied on cross-border trade to keep their doors open and their employees paid. Economists warned that the tariffs could lead to higher prices for consumers and strained relations that might take years to mend. Protests erupted, with people on both sides of the border voicing their concerns. The message was clear. This wasn't the way to handle things. Diplomatic efforts were ramped up, with officials from both countries trying to find a way to de-escalate the situation. But the damage had already been done. Trump, however, remained defiant. To his supporters, this was just another example of him standing up for America, no matter the cost. But for many Americans, the reality was starting to hit home. Higher prices and uncertainty were becoming the new normal. The hope was that cooler heads would prevail, and that the long-standing friendship between the U.S. and Canada would weather this storm. Only time would tell if this tariff turmoil would be a footnote in history or a turning point in U.S.-Canada relations. One thing was certain. The world was watching, and the stakes were higher than ever. In response to Trump's outburst, Canada made a bold move. The political tension had been brewing for some time, with trade disputes and diplomatic clashes simmering beneath the surface. But this time, Canada decided to take a stand in an unexpected way. They constructed a wall, not a physical one of bricks and mortar, but a metaphorical barrier that was just as effective, if not more so. Not a literal wall, although that would be quite dramatic. Instead, they imposed a series of strict trade restrictions that effectively cut off a vital supply line. Canada decided to halt all trade passing through its territory to Alaska. This strategic move was aimed at hitting the U.S. where it hurt the most. Alaska, that remote part of America connected to Canada, is geographically isolated from the rest of the United States. Canada chose to leverage this unique situation. Alaska depends heavily on goods transported through Canadian roads and railways. Everything from food and fuel to daily necessities travels through Canada before reaching Alaska. Overnight, Alaska became an island, cut off from the rest of the U.S. The impact was immediate and significant. It was a daring move, sending shockwaves through the states. News outlets buzzed with the story, and social media erupted with reactions from both sides of the border. Suddenly, prices in Alaska soared. The cost of living, already high due to its remote location, reached unprecedented levels. Groceries, gas, even those moose-shaped chocolates tourists love became luxuries many could no longer afford. Store shelves began to empty and lines at gas stations grew longer. Alaskans felt the strain and anger quickly followed. Protests erupted and frustration was evident. Citizens demanded answers and solutions, but there were no easy fixes. Canada defended its actions. The government issued statements explaining their stance, emphasizing their right to control their borders and trade routes. They argued that they had every right to regulate what passed through their country. It was a matter of national sovereignty and economic strategy, and to be fair, they had a point. The move was a calculated response to what they perceived as unfair treatment and aggressive policies from the U.S. administration. Trump had initiated this conflict, and Canada was simply playing hardball. The political chess game had reached a new level, and the world watched closely to see what would happen next. The stakes were high and the outcome uncertain, but one thing was clear: Canada was standing firm. Remember those empty grocery store shelves at the start of the pandemic? It was a chilling sight, a stark reminder of our supply chain's fragility. People were panic buying, and shelves were emptied within hours. It felt like a scene straight out of a dystopian film. That scenario was a reality in Alaska, but on a much larger scale. Unlike our temporary shortages, Alaska faced a prolonged crisis. Its remote location and severe weather made restocking shelves and meeting demand incredibly challenging. Shelves were empty, and the prices for remaining items were astronomical. Essentials like bread, milk, and eggs turned into luxury goods. The cost of living soared, forcing families to make difficult financial decisions. People began hoarding gasoline as if it were gold. The fear of running out led to long lines at gas stations and a black market for fuel. It was a desperate bid to maintain normalcy in an increasingly chaotic environment. Building supply costs skyrocketed. Lumber, steel, and other materials became scarce, driving up prices and halting construction projects. Homeowners and builders scrambled to find affordable alternatives. Chaos ensued, all due to a trade war no one wanted. Tariffs and restrictions disrupted the flow of goods, creating bottlenecks and shortages. People fought over the last roll of toilet paper, turning store aisles into battlegrounds. Businesses in Alaska took a severe hit. Small businesses, the backbone of the local economy, were forced to shut down. The lack of tourists and high cost of goods made survival impossible. Tourism, a major income source for the state, vanished almost overnight. Once bustling tourist spots became ghost towns. Hotels, restaurants, and tour operators faced an uncertain future. Who would want to vacation in a place where a gallon of milk costs more than a Disneyland ticket? The high cost of living deterred visitors, further crippling the economy. It was a vicious cycle that seemed unbreakable. Job losses were rampant. The economic downturn led to widespread unemployment, and families struggled to make ends meet. Safety nets were stretched thin, leaving many without support. Families struggled to put food on the table. Food banks saw a surge in demand, and donations couldn't keep up. The sense of community was strong, but resources were limited. Alaska, once a symbol of American wilderness and self-reliance, became a cautionary tale about over-reliance on a single industry. The state's limited supply chain left it vulnerable to external shocks, or, in this case, relying on one country for supplies. The global trade network is a complex web, and when one link breaks, the entire system can collapse. Alaska's experience highlights the need for diversification and resilience in our supply chains. Meet Ranj Pillai, the Premier of Yukon. Yukon is a Canadian territory that shares its border with Alaska. Imagine them as siblings who frequently share their belongings. Pillai observed the trade conflict with a blend of amusement and frustration. He understood that this issue went beyond tariffs and trade routes. It was about people. Real individuals on both sides of the border were being caught in the turmoil. Pillai emerged as a voice of reason amidst the chaos. He challenged both Trump and the Canadian government, urging them to set aside their differences and seek a resolution. He reminded everyone that Yukon and Alaska were more than neighbors. They were friends, partners, almost family. He called for dialogue, cooperation, and a return to rationality. But his appeals seemed to go unheard. The political machinery was in full swing, and it appeared no one was willing to stop it.